This is Damian Macy, and as a part of our project for the Friends of the Library, our oral history project, I have today with me Mr. Fremont Schoeck. It's May the 26th of 2015, and we're at the library, and although Fremont did not grow up here, he's got some interesting stories to tell about his youth and his education, and also what brought him to Marshall. So Fremont, with that, you're on.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I was born and raised on a livestock grain farm around St. Jacob, Illinois, which is in Madison County, Illinois. I went to school at St. Jacob High School, and then I went to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale and got my degree in plants and soils. While I was going to school, I got a summer internship with at that time, Soil Conservation Service, which is a division of the Department of Agriculture, and it's now the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I worked in the summer and then went on full-time with them upon graduating in 1958. And I started out at Martinsville. Martinsville was my first permanent location and was there for a lot of years. And then I don't know if you want to just go where all I went. But
however you'd like to,
okay.
And I think just kind of chronologically, if you'd like.
Well, I worked with we worked with all of the farmers in Clark County, and I worked with Bob Slater, who was the technician here, and Bob and I think, was a really good team, and we got along well and shared our work, and we had a good time. I never, ever did not want to go to work every morning. Every morning I got up, I was ready to go to work. And then after the kids got a little bit out of high school, 2 were out of high school, 2 were still in school. Sorry. And that's a phone call.
Can we put this on pause? I can't hear.
I don't even know who it is. Okay.
Now, your work was with really the entire farmers, the entire county, right?
Right. Yeah, all of Clark County. We worked with any farmer, any landowner.
Okay.
Any landowner, so our land user. So, and of course, one of the things we did countywide was to the Mill Creek watershed, which is a flood prevention project. Mm-hmm. And so it protected the bottomlands from flooding. And we worked with the county and said that one of these retention dams would make a nice big lake, if you'd like one in the county. And we had people come in that explained what would happen to the county as far economically and so forth with a nice big recreational lake. And the county then established the county park board, and that's who financed the local part of the cost of the Mill Creek watershed project, and all of the works up there, the recreational parts of it were cost shared by the U.S. government. So,
and that's, I think, a real thing of seeing something as an idea that's come to pass, and really what it has done.
And it was hard to believe. They took these people that were acquainted with that sort of project. So this is what it's going to do tax-wise. This is what it's going to do to the merchants of the county and Marshall in particular. And it's hard to believe all the boats that are up there and all the money that's spent on recreation and the motorcycles that go up there and all that stuff. And
Fremont, a lot of those boats, a big part of them are not from Marshall either.
Right, and they're paying a tax to the county. So yeah, it's a good income. I don't know what the income is, but I know it's good. And it's hard to believe that was done back in the 70s. And now, look at it. And when I left Clark County, they were just getting ready to start building the big dam up at Clarksville. And I decided that I wanted to go into management. And I went to Kankakee, Illinois, and I worked in Kankakee for 2 years. And then, as an agronomist, working, I think, 17 or 19 counties. And then I transferred to Indiana as an area conservationist. And I then was the supervisor over 1/5 of the state of Indiana, which was really, really interesting and a good job, and I loved it. And then we were at Kendallville, Indiana, and then we moved to Huntington, Indiana, and then we moved to Jasper, Indiana, and my last station was at Greencastle, Indiana. And luckily I had a wife who did not mind moving. In fact, I came home from work one day and she said, when are we going to move again? And I said, oh, I don't know. She said, well, my closets are getting full. It's time for a move. And you know, they say 3 moves is equal to a fire.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we lived in 14 different houses in 41 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so we moved a lot. But it was fun all the while. And then when I retired from Greencastle, you was wondering why I came to Marshall. Well, our kids were all born and raised in Clark County. And they all went to the Martinsville High School. We had 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. The 2 older boys graduated from Martinsville. And then the 3rd boy graduated from Bradley Bourbonnais High School up by Kankakee. And then Linda, our daughter, she was the youngest of the 4. She graduated from East Noble at Kendallville, Indiana. So the kids, and then as the kids started finding girlfriends and ladies to marry, we would leave them behind. So we've scattered kids all the way from Columbus, Ohio, up to north of Fort Wayne, Indiana. One of the boys now lives out in Pennsylvania, and Linda is a nurse in Indianapolis. So I have none of the kids with me, but I decided I wanted to come back to Marshall. I like Clark County. I think it's the best spot in the world. It's the best spot in Illinois. And I still have a soft spot for Martinsville, but I'm living in Marshall mainly because I knew that property probably moves a little better in Marshall if I ever decide I want to go to a nursing home or an apartment or something like that.
So what year did you actually come back to Marshall then?
Gosh, I don't know. It's been 20 years ago or more.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember.
So after 20 years, this does seem like home.
Oh yeah,
then,
it is, yeah, and it is home, and I have so many friends here, and in Martinsville and Marshall, and my daughter will be the person that selects my nursing home for me. You know, they always say be nice to your kids. They're the ones that are going to select your nursing home. But she has said, Dad, we won't ever move you as long as you have all your friends at Martinsville. So I'm almost to the point that I have somebody to go lunch with or something almost every day of the week.
That's great.
Yeah, and now I've filled one of my buckets on my bucket list. I'm going to be a driver for the Shriners to take these children who have deformities or birth defects and their parents to the hospital. And that's
great.
always been on my bucket list, and I'm going to get to do that now. So,
Where will those hospitals be then?
well, they have 3 of them. Depending on what the problem is, they can either go to St. Louis, Cincinnati, or Chicago. The burns are in Cincinnati, and I'm not all up with this because I'm just getting started good. But I know that the deformities, like the feet that are turned in, turned out, knees that don't work right, that goes to St. Louis. And what goes to Chicago, I'm not sure. But I'm really looking for. I think it would just be a warm feeling to see that little kid come walking out when you took him in a wheelchair.
So these would not be emergency cases in most cases then, or something?
No, it'll be people, as I understand it, that really can't get what they need, like at Indianapolis or Terre Haute or somewhere. And the Shriners have, I forget how many hospitals over the whole United States, but there's absolutely no cost at all to the parents. We pick them up, we take them to St. Louis, we buy their lunch, the kids see the doctor, and we take them back home, all at no cost to them. That's all done by raising money by the Shriners. And there's a lot of people. I mean, anybody can be anybody who's a Mason can be a Shriner. So they have a large group.
So how does a child get registered or qualify for this kind of help and service?
Just ask a Shriner. They've got a little card that you sign, and we will take them now. And what I'm saying now, I'm not really sure of, because Glenn Jones is the guy that's been working with me, and we lost him just a day or two ago. But as I understand it, you just ask a Shriner and you're in. Now, and it's not really like they don't pay anything. They will. I think the Shrine takes the insurance. In other words, if you have insurance and they pay half, that's what it costs. But the parents, doesn't cost them a cent, and we even take them out to lunch while we have them there. I mean, everything is paid for. And
Wow. Though they at least have to have some earlier commitment, like with a doctor or something?
now that I don't know for sure whether they do or not. I would assume they might, or it might be because maybe they don't have insurance and can't really go to a doctor. I don't know. See, that's what I'm going to find out. That's all new, but it's so thrilling to be into something like that. But I've always liked kids. I coached Little League for 20 years. I coached Little League before I had kids. It was kind of interesting. We had a guest minister at church, and she married a boy from Martinsville. And when I walked into the church, I heard him tell his wife, "He taught me how to play baseball." And I thought, gosh, you couldn't have said anything nicer. It just warmed my heart. But I like kids. So.
Kind of made a loop back then.
Yes, yeah. You're getting paid for something you did, 40 years ago.
Is there an age range of these children then?
For the most part, I think they're all fairly young. And I don't know. That I'm going to find some of that stuff out. But it's just full of all kinds of information. And I think most of them are younger, because that's when they need to fix those things like the legs that are turned in and turned out and so forth.
Do you take them in your own vehicle then, or is there a van or something available?
Well, I can take them in my own. The Shriners pretty well tell us they have cars of their own. And then they can also rent cars, like at Enterprise or somewhere, I think in Terre Haute, or you can take your own car. And if they do, then they pay the person mileage for driving their own car. So it's a good deal, and it's just a project that they spend millions and millions a day.
Oh my.
And I guess their doctors are the best doctors they can get. So
That's something would be nice to know later on how that works out, and
Yes.
what some of your
Yes.
experiences
Oh
are.
yeah, I'd be glad to share that, because I've heard people share that with me, and they get all excited when they're talking about it. And they have slide series they can show. But yeah, it'd be a good.
So is your commitment for like a year or 2 years, or is
I
it
think
kind of
it's-
open-ended?
I think it's open-ended. Yeah, it's open-ended. And when I get to the point that I don't want to drive or can't drive anymore, because most of the people that are doing this are retired. See, so you're looking at people that are 60 years old on up.
That's young.
Yeah, and nowadays 70 and 80 years old even, people are, and I love to drive. I drive all over the United States to see my kids. So
Did you have to take some kind of a qualifying test and some criteria that you were able to do this?
no, but they do a pretty good search somehow, and I'm
Probably
not
a background check. of
Yeah,
some kind.
because I filled out some forms and I gave them all my license stuff and all my insurance stuff, and I pretty well shared everything with them.
Even
So-
your fingerprints?
Not yet, not yet. But I know I took a whole bunch of paperwork over to Terre Haute to the temple the other day, and I'm kind of waiting now, because the first trip I'll go with somebody, which is kind of nice. I don't want them sending me to the hospital in
That's
St.
cold.
Louis by myself. So, and then from then on, as I understand it, I'll probably be going by myself. Or maybe at some time I'll even be taking somebody with me and training them to do it. So
Now, if you take someone like to St. Louis, is there a time frame? Do you go down there, leave them, and come back, or do you stay there?
I think we go down and we wait for them to come back that day. If they have to stay overnight, we put them up for the night, and they put up the driver for the night.
Okay, you
'Cause
don't have to
couldn't
camp in
drive-
your car then.
No, yeah, you couldn't drive back to Marshall and then drive back the next day to get them. But I think most of the time, it's a one-day trip.
I see.
So I don't know. I'm all excited about it.
Where is the center or the head office for the Shriners that takes care of this type of thing?
Now, I don't know. Now, the center for this area is down at East St. Louis. Our temple is in East St. Louis. Now, there's a temple in Terre Haute, which is only 15 miles away. And I think that the Shrine Club in Clark County does do some work with Terre Haute, because we're so close. And we're so far from East St. Louis. We're the furthest away of all of the clubs. So
Chicago isn't exactly close down the road either.
No, that's right. But we had a meeting the other night in the Shrine Club, and this Clark County Shrine Club, I mean, they raised thousands of dollars for the house, and all that money from they have 4th of July over at Casey at the park. All that money goes to the hospitals, and they're raising thousands of dollars over there on the stuff that they do with their fish fry and all the things.
And I think so many times people are not aware of how that money is used either.
And they don't advertise. Somebody said the other day, why don't you guys advertise like they do down the hospital in Memphis that Danny Thomas started? And I said, well, probably because we have members all over the United States, and they're doing it one-on-one rather than trying to raise money, from a central spot. I don't know that, but I know they raise a bunch of money. And there's people in the Shriners, you don't have to be rich to be a Shriner. I mean, if you want to give them $100, give them $100. If you want to give them $5, you give them $5.
Every dollar counts.
That's right. Yeah.
With your background, and you mentioned St. Jacobs, is where you started out
Right.
life. Do you still have some family living in that area?
I have a brother that lives down there. All of his boys have moved away, so he's down there. Just he and his wife are down there on the farm. I sold my part of the farm out to him because this is the closest I've been to that since I graduated from college. So.
And what is his name?
Norman.
Norman.
And he has had some really bad health issues here lately, but is seeming to be getting along pretty good now. But St. Jacob was my home, and most of the stuff that I've done and all the schooling was because I had an ag teacher that he was sort of my go-to, and he's
mentor,
the one. Yes, my mentor, and he's the one that talked me into taking agriculture, and so I kind of thank Mr. Launius for everything I've done.
You feel he has steered you right then? Huh?
Yes.
What was his name?
Launius, Delmer Launius, Launius. Yeah. And he was a really good.
Delmer,
Delmer, Delmar, I think. Yeah.
did you keep in touch with him after
I did
school?
for a long time, yeah. Of course, he's passed away now, and he and my dad were good friends. And if you remember Paul, what was the representative from Troy, Illinois? Paul, he ran for president one time, but Mr. Launius and this guy were really good friends, and my dad got to know him.
Can't think of his name.
But
now,
I can
know
remember
him.
when this man ran for president, or was maybe even in the primaries. My dad had a wheelchair, and on the back of it, he had "Vote for Paul." Now I can't think of his last name, but I can still see my dad going down the hallway with that sign on the back of his wheelchair.
So did you get involved in politics?
No. Well, as working for the U.S. government, you can't, Even,
know.
and sometimes that was good because, sometimes you get a big mouth and you're telling people how you think it ought to be run. They'll say, well, then why don't you run for it? And they suggested we not get in anything political, not even just Democrat, Republican, but school boards and that sort of thing, because there's always two sides, and it was just recommended we not do it. So it was a good thing that I could help and make recommendations, but I didn't have to really do the thing.
Things get pretty thorny sometimes.
Yes. But like the watershed, there were people that were against the watershed and are still against it, and probably could for good reason. But the will of the people's what did it. So.
Now, when you were here, were you located in the Martinsville office at
Right.
that time?
The office was in Martinsville. Yeah, Clark County was funny. It had kind of a agriculture battle going on who lives in Marshall and who lives in Martinsville.
And then there's Casey.
And then there was Casey that was out on the edge, yeah. But Martinsville and Marshall mainly, and so Martinsville got USDA, Marshall got Extension. And that sort of quieted things. But Extension did have an office in Martinsville also.
That's right.
So, yeah. So
Who was the director of the office at that time?
the director of...
Of the Martinsville USDA office?
I was.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we had two agencies. The other agency was the Agricultural Stabilization. And that would have been Bob Seed or Paul Newton. Yeah, so, and they would have been the head of that agency, and I was the head of the Soil Conservation Service. or USDA.
And of
But
course,
I got to work with a lot of people, Joe Kemp, Lawrence Lycan, George Murphy, just all of the people that are the movers and shakers for the county. We worked with the city of Marshall. I don't remember the man that was the mayor then started with a P. His last name was it's like Pennick or anyhow, it was so nice to work with all of these people, and there are a lot of good people in Clark County. Another reason I came back.
It sounds like your contacts were all very positive and held some particular memories.
Yeah.
Of course, Paul Newton just retired here a few years ago.
Right, and he's moved over here to Marshall now, or in the Marshall area. Yeah, Lyman Schaller down at West Union was a big worker. I mean, I don't know. Well, gosh, we went out to meetings anytime there was a meeting we could go talk about the watershed or anything, we went to it. And I worked with the ag teachers. But Lyman Schaller was a mover. And I'm glad they finally put something up at the park with his name on it, because he really worked for that. More than probably anybody that I know.
And again, it's just like you were talking earlier, it's amazing all these things that happen, and many times people are just not aware of all the behind the scenes things that people do.
Yeah. And that's why when I watch TV, I love to watch the programs that have the politics, not Democrat, Republican, but just politics. How you work with things and you find, like they call the boss, you find the boss cow, and that's the one that kind of runs things. It's a lot of fun, but it takes a lot of training, a lot of patience. Sometimes you bite your tongue.
From the Martinsville office then, where did you go?
I went to Kankakee.
Okay. You mentioned Kankakee in here, but I wasn't sure that sequence.
At Kankakee, and then I worked at the area level there. There was like 18 to 20 counties. And it was just kind of a training thing before I went to become an area conservationist, where I was running things. And then I did that in 3 different areas in Indiana.
Are there particular frustrations, or you think back and say, oh my gosh, I wished I hadn't gotten involved in this or that?
Yeah.
I'm sure there must have been.
Yeah, when I started out, in the first 20 years I worked, we worked with farmers and land users because they wanted us to. You would ask me, would you stake off and survey and design a pond for me or a terrace system? And we'd say, sure, I'd be glad to. And then USDA got into where some of these things where they were forcing people to do certain things, and it wasn't as much fun, because you had to, I guess we just had to do things sometimes that really I didn't like to do, but you had no choice.
Then you had to be a Mr. Nice Guy.
Right. But I know, and we helped people. Anytime there are rules and regulations, and you don't know all of them, you can be helped. And I had one man in particular, and he was just giving us heck, and come to find out what we helped him do solved his whole problem. But he just drove off and never even thanked us for doing it. Sometimes working with the public is a thankless job.
It is.
And you know that.
And you can try and try, but there's no way you can please everyone and have them all happy.
That's right. And that's why when you're president of the United States, you're only like 53% or something of people like you.
Oh my.
Yeah. And it's the same way in the state as far as a governor or whatever you're doing.
Knowing what you have done in the past and those wonderful experiences, in today's environment, do you think you'd like to go back in today's environment?
I don't think I could do as much good as I think I did doing it when I did. We did a lot of drainage work in Clark County. And of course now drainage isn't very well looked at by some of the environmentalists. But we were helping them drain cropland. We weren't draining swamps or anything that had ecological value, really. And it really improved the income for the farmers. I mean, we put in like 40 miles of surface ditches on fields for people in 1 year.
So that converted some scrap land into production.
Or something that maybe was only getting 30 bushel to the acre, and after draining you got 60 or 70 back in there. Now it's 200, but back then 100 bushel corn was unheard of. They'd come up to town and brag about 100 bushel corn. He'd say, yeah, I'll bet he did. He didn't. He's not using all the acres. But yeah, it helped a lot.
My dad owned the grain elevator in Martinsville.
Yes. We just lived 2 blocks from him. Yeah.
And I remember, this would have been early 1950s anyway. He came home one day at lunch and someone had got 100 bushel to the acre. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's just unheard of. My land, that's a new record. Yeah. So it's a different environment today.
Yeah. See, and now it's 200 bushels to the acre. But look they used to have herbicides and pesticides, and they were poisonous, and they did all kinds of things to the birds. Now you can almost drink the stuff, and all it'll kill is a certain weed.
But even now, there's a lot of controversy, I think, and some anti-insecticides.
Yes, there is, and there always will be somebody. And probably anytime you do something, you may harm somebody or something. Yeah, but agriculture, in my lifetime, my gosh, soybeans have gone from 30 bushel to the acre to 80 or 90 bushel to the acre. It's just, I can't believe it.
And at that time, no one had heard of a thing called GPS in the tractor.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that blows my mind, how they can do that.
Mine too.
And you drive down the road and look at those corn rows. Used to be, looks like they shot them in with a rifle. Yeah. Even the farmers that you look at, you say, they really weren't one of the better farmers. Their fields weren't as nice and clean as some of the others. Theirs looks just as good now. But there are a lot of good farmers in this county.
I think, too, you've seen a tremendous difference in the cost of the farm equipment and the cost of farming, haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, now, $500,000 for a piece of equipment's nothing. Yeah. 2 bottom plows. I can remember when I was a kid, my dad was the substitute mail carrier, and our mail carrier died. And so then Dad started carrying mail. Well, my brother and I did all the plowing and disking, and then Dad would plant that afternoon when he got off the mail route. And I was only like 9 or 10 years old. But it was a 2 bottom plow. And then we got a 3 bottom plow. We were really going great guns. Now they do 35 feet at a time, maybe more.
The price of that land, too, has gone up a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah. Went from $200 an acre to whatever you want to give. I guess there's been some gone for $8,000 or $9,000 an acre. But like somebody said, they ain't gonna make no more. We got what we got now. So. Yeah.
But some of those fields that I can think of as a youngster, kind of clay soil and all, and you get a little bit of warm weather, and that corn just fired and looked droopy.
Yeah.
Where now that same field has got some pretty nice looking corn almost the year round.
And most of that is due to their tillage. They don't plow it up and put all that residue down underneath. The residue's mixed up through all of it. The residue is like a mulch, and it keeps some moisture in there. Yeah. And Clark County will always do better in a dry year than a wet year because we have predominantly real clay soils. And you just go between here and Paris, and when you get to the hills, that's where the glacier stopped.
And that soil is dark.
Yes.
And the farther north you go, the darker it gets.
That's right. And the more corn to the acre and the more beans to the acre,
The Fremont, I'm always amazed. You go up around to Arthur and you see the Amish up there with their horses and their plows. And my goodness, they farm a lot of acreage. And those fields just look marvelous. Yeah.
We worked, one of the areas I was in was up in northeastern part of Indiana, and there were about a third of that county was Amish. And those people, we worked with those people, and we helped them go to no-till. They made no-till planters that they pulled with their horses, and we would take them on trips out to Pennsylvania, where they have some of the Amish people, and they do a lot of inventive type things. That was the other thing in Clark County. We knew who the inventive type farmers were, the Arnott Wrights, maybe George Murphy, Lawrence Lycan, just those kind of people would always try something. Maybe it'd just be 10 acres, but they were always willing to try something. And Max Strom, they were just David Shiver. They just, I could sit and mention all kinds, and they're all over the county.
did you have a particular favorite of projects that you like to work on? You mentioned the drainage and the tiling and all. Was there something that you thought, hey, that's just something I really want to do more than anything else?
The least likable thing I did was to be on TV. And being close to Terre Haute, the area I was in went all the way over to Vandalia. So if somebody over there had an appointment we had a spot with Wayne Jenkins at that time. And if somebody was sick or something happened, they'd call and they'd say, hey, Frame, would you do that for whomever? And I'd go over there and do it. And I got to where it was easier, but I always knew I had a good heart, because if I could get through that without falling over dead. And Wayne Jenkins had a favorite thing, because he would set you down and visit with you, and you'd tell him what you were going to talk about or the slides you were going to show. And then he would go upstairs and do the weather. And then as he'd leave, he'd say, now if I don't get back down here, just go ahead and start on your own. You know, and that was just a standing thing with him. He never did do it to me then. Oh my gosh, if that happens. Yeah.
Left you high and dry.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a fun thing. But I don't know if there was anything that I really didn't like. Like I said, I just never ever got up in the morning and said, I don't think I want to go today. It was always something new. I had good people to work with. Bob Slater was a gem to work with.
You, Bob?
Yeah, Bob was a good guy and very smart, very likable, good with people. It was funny. We had a man came in one day, and we would take turns. If you came in and Bob wasn't busy, he would talk to you. Well, if somebody come in, the next one came in, I'd take him. We traded back and forth. Well, this one man come in, it was my turn, and Bob had a loud voice. And I said to this man, can I help you? And he said, I don't want you, I want him. I can hear him. I think the only time is somebody didn't want me to help him or didn't want to talk to me. But it was funny. But and he was right. Bob's voice was a lot. That's the one thing that I wish I had better, was a speaking voice. One of the things I did when I became an area conservationist in Indiana, I taught public presentations to all of our employees. Every employee, 150 or whatever there was in Indiana. I had classes all over Indiana on how to do public speaking. And that really helped, but I've never ever had a good public speaking voice. And to this day, I answer the phone and they'll say, is your husband there? You know, and of course I have to explain to them.
So in education, in your school, did you have some public speaking classes or something?
No, not really. Not really. I just, and I'm not sure how, I'm not sure how I got into that, but I thought it would be a fun thing to do. And I forced myself. I am not a public speaker. I don't like speaking in front of people. And that helped me because I was teaching other people how to do it. So if I taught them how to do it, then I had to, do it too.
You kind of got shoehorned in it and learned it by osmosis.
Yeah. But when I moved back to Marshall, that's one of the first things I told the preacher we had that. I said, now, I'm not mad at you, I'm not mad at anybody, but I am not going to do any public speaking. I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah, it wasn't fun and I didn't want to do it. So I don't do it.
Well, I guess when you retire, you have that option.
Well, I had a fellow retired who worked for me in Terre Haute, and when he retired, he told his wife, he said, I'm never wearing a necktie again. And he didn't. In his casket, he had on a regular shirt and just a sweater or something. Yeah.
Well,
he never wore it. That's right.
Fremont and all of that experience and everything, you've sure had some interesting ones. Is there a particular person or persons who you really feel, boy, they just influenced me? I know you mentioned your
Mr. Lonius,
your ag teacher.
Yeah, there was a fellow. When I left Clark County, I went up to Kankakee, and the fellow's name was Bob Smith, and he was the area conservationist there. And Bob was a mentor of mine, to the point that he worked with my wife and I. When we started out, he said, and apparently he thought I was going to do some moving. Maybe he thought I was going to be a go-getter. But I've tried to follow what he did. But he told my wife and I, he said, now, I don't care what you do, but when you go to buy your appliances, back in the 50s, buy them at Sears. And no matter where you're at, there's always a serious repairman. And we pretty well did that. And little things like that Bob helped us with. And then I was trying to get an area conservationist job in Illinois. And you have to vie for those things and write essays and stuff. And I couldn't get on in Illinois as an area conservationist. And Bob was gone for like 2 or 3 weeks. He took a trip, I think, to Alaska or somewhere. And this job opened up, and they sent out bids for it over in Indiana. So I filled the thing out, and darn if I didn't get chosen. And the guy that chose me was an old Navy veteran. He was the head of the Soil Conservation Service in Indiana. His name was Buell Evans, and he was a very strict, straight. I mean, he was like a general, and his personality was. You guys are over here for a 2-day session. We're going to have a party out of my house tonight. I want to see you there. He didn't say, come out if you want, or you. And that's the way he ruled.
That military influence, it sounds like.
And everybody in the state office was afraid of, And they told me, they said, now just be careful, do what you need to do, name, serial number, and so forth. But he and I got along great, and I had a lady that worked for me, and she was just mean. And she said to me one day, if you don't get me some help, I'm going to quit. And there was no way I could get her any help. And so I just handed her the form, the resignation form. And I told Buell that, and he laughed and thought that's the funniest thing he'd ever heard, because she had run over people. And it was kind of a training area anyhow. But
did she fill it out, or did she say?
No, she just put it in her drawer, and she wasn't going to leave, and I knew she wasn't.
It's a good bluff then.
Yeah, yeah. So we did get along after a while, but she was just mad at the world.
Those are hard to work with. Too.
Yeah. And at the same time, I had an engineer up there that was from North or South Carolina. And he was the nicest man you'd ever want to find. He had that slow, easy-going motion. And I had soil scientists on my staff that did all the soils mapping. I had engineers on my staff. Had agronomists on my staff. Yeah, we had maybe as high as 20 people working out of our office doing work in maybe 20 different counties. So it was interesting. And of course, you have to hire and fire.
Going back and looking over the years of your experience, is there a particular event in the United States or world history or something that has really, I guess, made an indelible impact that you think on you? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I think one of the things, the Soil Conservation Service, the head of Soil Conservation Service in Washington was always a person that came up through the ranks. And then when President Ronald Reagan was in, they changed it to where it was an appointed political position. And that, I think, probably was one of the biggest changes I saw while I was with the Soil Conservation Service, because we were no longer all within our agency. We were having to keep some of these other people happy, and we were being guided by whatever the administration at that time was wanting to do.
Would those people be more, should we say, theoretical, rather than practical? They didn't really understand or know what was taking place.
Sometimes this is what we want done, but they didn't know really how to do it.
See that?
And sometimes they weren't good administrators, because they were. Well, one of the people we had came to. I can't remember who the president was then. I think it happened to be a Democrat, but whoever. I think it was Jimmy Carter, maybe. And the man that was going to be the head of the Soil Conservation Service came into Fort Wayne. I had to go pick him up at the airport. And he had just gotten the job. He was from Texas, and he was a cowboy. And I think probably his mom and daddy put a bunch of money into, that's how they get that job. And he had bought 2 new suits, and he had them in a suitcase and had never tried them on. And one of them, the cuffs were like 6 inches from I felt sorry for him, but he just was not, something for the public. But he ended up being a really nice guy, and he stuck around even after they changed politics. And every time there was a change in politics, then we got a new head. Yeah, so, and that was the big change, where before we sort of did our own thing, so. And it influenced who in our organization went on up to a little bit, I think. Although, like, my job had nothing to do with what side of the politics you were on. In fact, they recommended you not get into anything political, so.
We've seen a lot of things take place over the last few years in the way of inventions, new things that have come about. What would you say is the most significant invention or thing that you have, maybe even in your home, that you just say, I just can't live without that?
Well, I think in farming, the no-till planting system, newest thing they got. I live out here by the golf course, and that land around there I watch, and you know, they'll hit it once with a disc just to kind of chop it up, and boom, it's planted. And in one day, all of those fields are done. But it just no-till planting, the GPS, all of this stuff hooked up so they can, you know, like they got maybe 36 rows or whatever at a time. It's all monitored by a computer. That computer stuff they just couldn't do without. I remember when the John Deere dealer here was Flowers, yeah. And we came out with a chisel plow, and we were promoting keeping some of the residue on top of the soil. And I said to Bob Flowers, you've got your long grain line meeting coming up. Could I interest you in getting a chisel plow there? And we would be glad to explain to people how it works. No, he said, we don't want that. I said, we got a plow that works and we've got a disc that works, and we don't need that. And it wasn't 2 or 3 years we were having chisel plows. But I remember, and Bob was very progressive. It wasn't that he was against that. It was just that John Deere said, we're going to sell plows. And when you have a chisel, you don't need all that other equipment. So, and that helped farmers because they didn't have to have quite as much investment, maybe. But the no-till planters is the big thing, I think.
How about in your home? What maybe appliance or?
I think the TV. You know, and if there's nothing else going on, you can sit down, you can watch TV. You know, you can watch them build a house. You can, you know, you can watch them do anything. Being a hot Cardinal fan, I can watch the Cardinal games. But I think the TV's probably, you know, the kids grow up watching TV. My little grandkids.
Really, too much, probably.
Too much, yeah. That's right. But it's been a fun life. I've enjoyed everything I did.
If you were, let's say, England or somewhere in Europe, and you were telling someone, I'm from a little town in Marshall, Illinois, what would you tell them about Marshall and why it's a good place to live?
Well, first of all, I guess I would tell them there's about 4,000 people here. We elect our own people that sort of run things and make the decisions for the public. We know the manager of all of the stores by first name because we're in a club, if we're in Optimist or Rotary or the Masons or something, or in church with these people, and you pretty well know everybody. There are people that don't like that sort of thing. I personally like that. But there are people who don't like you knowing something about my family or something. But I guess, I don't know, you know, the traffic isn't bad. You don't have to lock your car up when you go uptown, at least most of the time. It's just a nice place to live, and you get friends. I go out to lunch probably 4 days a week with different friends, just for the fun of it.
Do they buy?
No, we go Dutch. We go Dutch. And I see you at some of those places too. But I don't know how much different that would be than Europe. Now, I've not been to Europe that much. I went to Germany, and I loved their day when they put all their wares out on the street, and you can buy a chicken or whatever, you know, and then you can barter for. I saw a friend of mine. He wanted a pewter beer mug, and my gosh, he got it for a third of what the guy asked. I mean, they just bartered and bartered and bartered. And finally, the guy, I don't know if John wore him out or whether. Anyhow, he got the mug, but I'd never seen anything like that. Now, we don't do that in our stores here. We don't go to the IGA and say, well, I'll give you $1 for that loaf of bread.
They'd probably tell you where to go.
Yeah, they tell me to go out to Walmart. That's right. That's right.
Well, Fremont, it's been a delight visiting with
enjoyed it.
you, and I appreciate you spending some of the time here with us and telling about your past and so many things that you've seen as changes over the years. And I think we're destined probably for continued change.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to stalemate now.
No, I'll tell you, I realized what had gone on. My grandson called me one evening, and he was like in the 4th or 5th grade. And he said, Grandpa, write me a message telling me what it was like when you were in the 4th grade. And I went to a country school. I mean, all 8 grades in one room. And I got to thinking, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in my time. We got AM radio, we got FM radio, we got television, we went to the moon. They're not going to do that in the next lifetime. I got a little great-grandchild now that's 2 months old. He's not going to see as much change as I have, I don't think. I don't know how he could.
I remember my mother, who taught primarily one-room schools for many years and then other schools, but she told the kids one time they were talking about space or the planets or something, and about, no, it'd be impossible for anyone to ever get to the moon. Mm-hmm. And she said, my gosh, they did get to the moon in my lifetime. And here I was telling all those kids untruths.
Yeah. I remember we bought a set of encyclopedias when our oldest son was maybe in the 1st or 2nd grade, and we thought he really needed those. And he was reading, he said, well, it says here, one day man will walk on the moon. He said, they've already done that. That encyclopedia was out of date. He wasn't even in high school yet.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've both seen a lot of changes. I really enjoyed talking with you, Fremont. And thanks so much for your time.
Well,
we really
thank you.
appreciate
It's kind of fun going back and remembering some of those things.
It is. And this will be on file in the library here, and then also available for people even outside the community. Okay. So we really appreciate that.
All right.
And so glad to have you as a part of the Marshall community.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'll be here as long as I can.